I'm starting to do healthy things again. I'm starting to get healthy. Like I will, back before I don't know the past like few months since before I started at Trophy Smack, because I've just been so busy. I like kind of took over this very unhealthy lifestyle where I'm eating takeout every night and I'm not going for runs or anything because I'm too busy working, right? So like I completely just let the physical aspect of my life just disintegrate into nothing. But I went for a run. I've been for a run on every day over the past 11 days outside of 2, and one because I was hungover, and the other one was because I was drinking. So I haven't been drinking as much. I've cut down on that as well, and I'm eating healthier. Like today, instead of making a hamburger, I made hamburger nachos. So I don't get I think it's the carbs or whatever from the bread. I guess chips are less. I don't know if it's
is that healthier? It's like the same thing. It's just like it's meat.
I was kind of thinking the same thing.
It was just meat, cheese, and some sort of gluten product. And then some vegetables. It's just a different arrangement. And the bread is crispier instead of doughier. It's the exact same thing.
Yeah, pickles, had jalapenos, and it had
but you realize onions. You could also just but if you made a burger with like a beef patty, ketchup, jalapenos, onions, pickles, like what is the difference?
Well, and also keep in mind too, I made fries, but I made the fries in the air fryer instead of like getting them deep fried. So
I can't believe this guy is out here trying to pitch nachos as his health.
And he drank 2 beers while he was.
This guy's like, I'm trying to get healthier. I'm eating nachos.
He drank 2 beers while he was doing it to wash it down. So I mean, it's all good, right? But they were light beers.
No, they're PBRs. They're PBRs. Jesus. And now I'm drinking a soda too. So
way to get healthy. Good.
It is healthier. Like it's not like a bun, It's still loaded with or my fries are still loaded with like salt and pepper and Old Bay.
What's going on, Toronto Dave out there?
My goodness.
Damn goofy.
All right, can we just kick this show off? Let's go.
Let's go. Golly, I got to go back over to the other button again.
This is Fantasy Intervention. Now here to intervene with your fantasy life, Shane Manila, Jakob Sanderson, and Chase Vernon.
What is going on? It is Wednesday. That means it's time for Fantasy Intervention. I am your host. You can find me at FantasyJ77 over there on Twitter. With me, my co-host every Wednesday night, Chase Vernon FF_intervention. Woo! How are you tonight, sir?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. I'm chilling, dude. It's I'm feeling great because I'm eating healthier, as we just discussed right prior to the intro. And I'm doing well, man. I didn't listen to my music, but I'm doing well. I'm rocking and rolling.
Yeah, it sounds like it's going to be a pretty sleepy night for you without having the music pre-gaming. We don't have Shane tonight, so no life lessons, but we got our boy Jakob Sanderson at Jakob Sanderson. My dude, how are you tonight, sir?
I'm doing good. Combine week, fun week. I feel like this is, yes. I don't know. The Dynasty season never stops, right? But if there's such a thing as like an off-season break for Dynasty, I would consider it between like the Super Bowl and the Combine. And this is like the first week back of official Dynasty SZN, I think. So this is fun. We're getting all the interviews. My favorite season is we're going to add to the backfield season when every coach comes in, they're like, yeah, currently you have one running back signed to your roster. Are you going to add? They're like, yeah, we'd like to have more than one running back signed. Some guy on Twitter is like, gotta sell this guy. He's getting
Chase Edmonds.
Yep.
It's like the Doug Peterson quotes making the rounds, and it's like, yeah, you think that they want to upgrade over like JaMychal Hasty, who I don't even know if he's signed. Like, probably, yeah, I would too.
Right. And we have our guest tonight, one of the newest members over there at Football Guys. He is also with the Debbie Royale, Mr. Jay Stein. You can find him at _Jay Stein. How are you tonight, sir?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. I feel a little bit like an imposter here being on between Scott Connor and Bob Harris. So, two amazing guys here. And then you got little old me here. But thanks so much for having me on. Jacob, congratulations on Thinking. That's awesome. I'm excited for you.
Thank you.
And, it's funny. I'm really new to the space. I've just been doing this for about a year now. I had an original idea. I didn't know what to do with it. I wrote a book, like this book report type of thing, research report, and I sent it out to a bunch of people. Chase and Jacob were two of those people I sent it to. Yep. Chase actually, went through, read it, and offered me a lot of advice how to turn it into an actual fantasy football article instead of just sort of nonsense.
So I forgot all about that. That's awesome. Yeah. I forgot all about that, dude. That's crazy.
I really appreciate it. I've been a fan of the show. I some of the mock drafts you guys have done, I've been involved with, and so I really appreciate you guys having me on. But I would say for any of the new content creators out there, Chase, Jacob, these are the guys you want to reach out to. They'll help you out. They'll give you good advice. So
yeah. I mean, I've only been in this space for coming up on a year, and to be quite honest, Chase is the one that got me doing what I'm doing and has made it so much fun. He's teaching me along the way at the same time. So not trying to boost your head or, make it explode the big balloon or anything like that, because, you're trying to eat healthy. We don't want you getting
big,
It's already too big. Well, guys, let's get into some stuff tonight. We didn't get to talk last week too much on the Eric Bieniemy hire over there in Washington. I know Chase has renounced his Washington fandom. But so I want to go to Chase here first, just because he used to be a Washington fan. With Eric being named the OC in Washington, does it move the needle at all, in your opinion, for any of the wide receivers, now that it looks like Sam Howell is going to be QB1 there?
Well, he's not he's QB1, but he's not the starter. Is that the clarification? Well, I didn't understand what the difference was between those terms.
Rivera is so messed up in the head. Like, everything that he's done over the past 6 months has been just absurd. Like, him not knowing, what was it, the last game of the season or something like that? Like, him not knowing that they had another week or something along those. I mean, just the stuff that he says and the stuff that he does, saying that, okay, Sam Howell is their starter moving forward, and then there's Sam Howell's a starter, but he still has to earn his job, and then now he's he's the QB1, but he's not our starter, or whatever the hell he said. I'm what the heck is happening?
Maybe he's planning to run the Wildcat. Maybe he's QB1, but their starting offense won't feature a quarterback. It'll just be Brian Robinson handing off to Antonio Gibson and J.D. McKissick.
Well, when you don't have an offensive coordinator, right? First, it's a really, really bad idea to name your QB1 or your starting quarterback without an offensive coordinator, because you don't know if the quarterback is going to fit in with the offensive coordinator. So, having Bieniemy come to town, I think is a blessing overall for the Washington Commanders. The biggest blessing is the fact that when Ron ends up getting fired by week 6 or week 10, they'll actually have a head coach in the wing waiting to take over that role, who is not only
Jack Del Rio.
I was going to ask, did they give him that title, offensive coordinator, assistant head coach?
Yeah, he's the assistant head coach as well. So the biggest needle mover for me is the fact that Washington goes from a run first offense that was still a vertical stretch type passing attack to a pass first offense that gets pretty good efficiency out of the running back position, although they don't run nearly as often. I'm hoping that Ron Rivera doesn't try to force Bieniemy to do that, but that was probably in his initial talks. It's probably in his initial talks, hey, we're going to bring you on. We're going to let you run whatever offense you want to run. You run the show right here. Jacob, do you agree?
I don't know. I mean, the hire in some ways makes perfect sense in that, I think Eric Bieniemy, in my opinion, I mean, I've never interviewed him for a head coaching job. I have no idea, but at least just based on resume alone, he seems ostensibly qualified to be a head coach in the National Football League, obviously more than qualified to be an offensive coordinator in the National Football League. So from that sense, if he's willing to coordinate your offense, you should absolutely do that. But from the standpoint of like it actually fitting with the personnel and the coach, like it makes no sense, right? I mean, Rivera and Martin Mayhew came out after the end of the season, and I mean, they essentially intimated that Scott Turner wanted to be too fancy and pass the ball too much, and they wanted to establish the run more. Like that was kind of the vibe they gave off, right? So I don't know. And I honestly, I mean, I'll say this about Eric Bieniemy. I have no idea if he's a pass first guy in his heart. He is a running backs coach. He is a running back. He then coached with Andy Reid, and Andy Reid is a pass first coach. And Andy Reid has not always been as pass first as he was when he had the best quarterback, I don't know, maybe of all time, certainly in the NFL right now. So I'm not sure that like we can just look at what the Andy Reid Chiefs were with Patrick Mahomes and then say that Eric Bieniemy is a pass first coach. Like for all we know, he got back in there and he was like, you know, what I'm about is about tailoring to my personnel. We had Patrick Mahomes. If we get Patrick Mahomes, we'll pass the ball more. But I'm a running back. I want to pound that thing. It wouldn't surprise me. I think we can maybe infer more about like what style of runs they're going to call from what they were doing with the Chiefs. And I think like if we look at how they operated the run game in Kansas City, you know, I don't really see a whole lot of room for Brian Robinson in that type of framework, right? Like we saw Clyde basically just get played off played out of utility by basically just being too slow, right? They wanted guys who are going to be able to hit the edge faster, going to be able to run those stretch plays. So a guy that I'm really interested in buying is Antonio Gibson right now.
Yes, find him everywhere.
Like, I'm just not sure that Brian Robinson has a place in the type of offense that Bieniemy is going to run, but I'm also not sure that they're going to come out and be a +10 pass rate over expectation team. Like I think they could run a similar look of the Andy Reid offense, but with a lot more runs called.
Yeah, so I want to jump over to Jay with this because with some of the stuff that he does with this intelligent investor series, is there anybody on this Washington staff or the Washington team that because of this hire is now moving up in your investments?
I'd echo Jacob's sentiment on Antonio Gibson, but I'll make a few comments here on Eric Bieniemy. First thing is the QBs in Washington for the last 5 years have been just awful, right? So we're talking about Heineke, Wentz, Howell, Heineke, Alex Smith, and Haskins, Case Keenum and Haskins. So like before
Sanchez.
Yeah,
I had a post that was going crazy yesterday about that. It was brutal.
I think Garrett Gilbert took the field at one point.
Colt McCoy, don't forget. Josh Johnson, Fitzpatrick.
Before Bieniemy's going to be successful, we got to figure out the QB, and I don't know if that's Sam Howell or not. He was like a 5th round quarterback, so the NFL obviously made a statement there on that. So I'm not sure if that's like a very great situation as it is right then. And then the other piece of it is we don't know what Eric Bieniemy is. We didn't really see him call plays too much in Kansas City. So if you go under the assumption that Bieniemy's philosophies and his style is a lot like Andy Reid, then you're talking about West Coast offense. And you talk about some of these numbers here. So in 2022, the Commanders had 554 pass attempts and 538 rush attempts. So they were about a 50-50 pass run offense, right? The Chiefs, they're 651 pass attempts and 417 rush attempts. So they're a 61% passing favored offense. In 2021, they were 61%. In 2020, they were 61%. So there's from 51 to 61% sort of difference there in terms of, and if Eric Bieniemy brings over that sort of that same style that Andy Reid has, then we're talking about the 10% equals about 100 more pass attempts. So I don't know how that factors into each one of those wide receivers, but one thing I would mention is that Terry McLaurin is going to eat, and he's going to eat his every year. He's done that since he's entered the league. It's over 100 targets, about 1,000 yards, and about 5 touchdowns every year. So we know that's going to happen. So that doesn't change at all. But what are those extra 100, targets? Where do those end up filtering out? Do they go to Jahan Dotson? Do they go to Curtis Samuel? I think there's some interesting things to think about from that perspective. But I think the thing is we don't really know. So we're just sort of making sort of guesses here of what it could be.
Is Curtis Samuel? I mean, I think what like if I'm thinking about how the Chiefs have operated, especially like they operate their wide receiver room in one of the most unique ways of any team in the league, and particularly in a way that Washington doesn't currently have the personnel for. So I'm curious to see what they bring in. But like if you think about how Andy Reid has operated his wide receiver rooms, like they'll have, they really haven't had an X wide receiver that is making a major impact in the passing game over the last while. Like a lot of times it seems like I think that they value their wide receivers a lot in the run game, to be quite honest. And if you think about like who they've had in this outside wide receiver mold, whether it be Chris Conley into Sammy Watkins, into Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Byron Pringle in between there, Demarcus Robinson, like they've
who's going to run those empty routes?
They've had these guys who are basically there. Like I assume that they have like some sort of run blocking utility to them, and they're mostly just running a lot of empty routes. Like you said, like they're running backside digs, they're running some go routes. They're not really a major focal point of the passing game. The guys who are a more major focal point of the passing game have been guys, over the middle in their tight end position. Obviously, Tyreek Hill is just like a unique entity unto himself, and Andy Reid's just not going to look a gift horse in the mouth. But like I think we kind of saw this year some of what they were doing. I mean, they're kind of casting guys into roles, right? Like we saw as guys kept coming in and out of the lineup in Kansas City this year. It's like when MVS was coming out, Justin Watson's playing that role. Like we have the guys in the middle with like Hardman, and that kind of became Tony, Sky a little bit. I'm curious to see what they do. I think if Curtis Samuel stays on this team, that he's going to get a lot of interesting touches. But beyond that, like I could see a bit of a rotation where like, are they going to want that more traditional, like big bodied X wide receiver? Because Dotson and McLaurin are both great outside wide receivers, but they aren't that. Like they don't fit that archetype at all.
They'll use De'Ami Brown in this role. So essentially, like, honestly, I think Washington's wide receiver room was better than the Chiefs' wide receiver room with Jahan Dotson.
Oh, it's
Curtis
great.
Samuel,
it's a good wide receiver room.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think that they will rotate. I think we're going to see a lot of Terry McLaurin in the slot. I think we're going to see a lot of Jahan Dotson in the slot. And I think we're going to see Curtis Samuel in the slot. They're all going to rotate. And I think the guy that we're going to see stretch in the field is going to be a guy like De'Ami Brown, who has the speed to do so. But those will be empty routes because regardless of who he has, Sam Howell is not capable of going through his progressions as well as most quarterbacks would be able to, and that would be probably his fourth read after we include whatever tight end they decide to bring in if it's not Logan Thomas. And then we also have the aspect of the rotations coming out the slot and the targets. For me, like I'm a little bit more hesitant on Terry McLaurin because, like Jacob brought up, they didn't use a prototypical wide receiver one, to run their passing offense through. They had Travis Kelce. So whether they decide to redesign this or Bieniemy decides to redesign the offense, or whether they decide to go through the rotational role like we saw with all the other Chiefs wide receivers, for me, that's the big question. I think that Curtis Samuel is somebody that if he's on free agent, if he's on waivers right now in Dynasty, I'd pick him up just to stash him. If you go into the fourth round of rookie picks, I would probably trade a fourth round pick for him. I don't know about a third round, maybe a late. Jahan Dotson for me is probably the biggest buy because he's going to get the touches that Kadarius Toney got. He's going to get the touches that Juju Smith-Schuster got. He's going to get the touches that Marquez Valdes-Scantling got because he will be running some of those deeper routes because he does have the speed. So he's going to be a facet. He has skill sets in every facet of the receiving game that I think they would like to utilize.
Yeah, and I think a great point was that 61% passing over there in Kansas City with understanding it's not Bieniemy calling the plays, but it's still, he's in the coaching staff there. I think that 61% does do something for, Gibson. That's, I think, is going to be the top back. All right, so.
I mean, the running scheme is going to be totally different, right? Like you're going to see way more stretch runs and outside zone runs, and you're going to see way less of the, like, bring in the fullback, run power up the middle. Like that's just not how they're going to operate. Like I'm not as convinced that they're going to be as pass heavy, but I am going to be convinced that like they're going to run more of a stretch style single back running scheme. And like, I just don't know if Brian Robinson can operate that. Like, I mean, he's not dumb. Like he's like a good running back in terms of like, he's not like an inefficient mover, right? Like he knows how to operate and he'll make the right cuts. I just don't know if he has the speed to get to the edge. Like, I think that might be non-workable by like
so
5. I could see Gibson
20 minutes into the show. I think Chase is already thinking about reclaiming the Washington Commanders as his team again.
Not
so
yet.
we're gonna
not until Snyder gets fired. Everybody's on.
He might be going to jail. $55 million loan. I don't know if you heard about that, but anyway, that's beside the point. All right. So as Toronto Dave S so eloquently put it right here, it is combine season. Let's do this. So I didn't want to put a ton of combine stuff in here into the show sheet for one reason only, is I don't want to speculate too much on what we're going to see, because we're going to see it. And next week we'll talk a lot about it. But I do have one very, very major question here, is what is your message to all the viewers about what you look at when it comes to the combine? Like, what would you tell them? This is what you need to look at. Jacob, let's start with you.
I mean, for 90% of Dynasty players, I would say it's mostly not relevant, just in the sense that, like, any individual athletic metric, to the extent that it correlates well with what a player is able to do, it mostly just correlates with how highly players get drafted at their position.
Yes.
So, like, if you're just a person who is only playing Dynasty, all of your rookie drafts are in May or later, like, honestly, I would just enjoy a beach vacation this week and maybe pay attention to some of the interviews or something if you really want. But obviously those guys lie too. Tight end is probably the only position where you can say, like, there's a very demonstrable correlation between athleticism and production, even once draft capital is accounted for. And a big part of that, though, I think, is just people not adequately accounting for what type of tight end people are drafting, right? Like, a lot of times when you see this and it's like, oh, even when you look at draft capital, it's like, yeah, but some teams are drafting a blocking tight end in round 3, right? And that guy runs a 4.8. But you can also look at how they produce in college. You can look at, are they a guy who's running a lot of routes off the line of scrimmage, or are they an inline guy? So I even think that's a little bit overstated. I think if you're drafting on underdog, for instance, like Ball is Life just talked about, ADPs, whatever, like, then you want to look at it, right? Because the combine absolutely will have an impact on draft capital for sure.
Yes.
It's too bad. The only guy that I was really excited to see a 40-time from this week was JSN, who's apparently not going to run it.
That news came out today, I believe.
It's going to matter more for some guys than others, right? Jalen Hyatt, for instance, like, the number one reason why he's being mocked in the first round is because he's fast. So if he comes out and he's only moderately fast, then he's probably going to go on day 2. If he comes out and he does run a 4.29, like, you can absolutely lock in round 1 draft capital for him. So I'd look at it more if you're doing, like, drafts with rookies in them now of any sort. But if you're just waiting until the rookie draft, like, I wouldn't worry about it.
Yeah, I don't, that's the thing, is you're playing Dynasty, or maybe even redraft as well. But when you're playing Dynasty, you're almost, as Toronto Dave just put in here again, double counting, when it comes to this. So, Chase, what do you got to add?
For mine, the Jacob kind of nailed it on the head when he was referencing Ball's Life. Is like, this was like the perfect time for best ball season to grab those guys. Like, what is it? A chain, like the rookies are going to end up running these insane 40s and the measurables, but also, like, I want to actually utilize the combine. And this whole past about, I want to say, like 2 weeks, I've been crunching the film, like, just going through everything. And I'm not somebody that watches the same game 10 different times to see how people are lining up and to see their footwork and to do this and that. I pretty much just watch it to try to educate myself. I would typically watch the same game about 3 times prior to the draft. And I want to see if I'm getting consistent scores out of what I'm grading these guys. So I pretty much just do a blind test each time. And I'm like, okay, this is what I'm giving them for speed. This is what I'm getting for agility. And then I want to see in the combine if everything that I assumed they were doing well is actually what they did well. Like, is this actually matching up with what I'm watching, or were they just going up against inferior talents? So if you have a guy that ends up, like, looking like a speed demon, but he plays in one of the weaker conferences, like, what's his 40 time? What's his burst score? How's he jumping? Like, and then I'll go back. And if something doesn't line up, I'll go back and I'll watch it. And I'll be like, oh, maybe it's because they were playing Wake Forest. And that's why he ended up sucking at, or that's why he ended up looking so great. Or maybe he was up against Clemson or whatever the case was. And that's, like, why he actually looked a lot slower to me, because they're playing up against superior athletes. So for me, it's more of like affirmation that I did a good job like actually lining stuff up, and that I can actually believe in this player and believe in the score that I gave them, versus like, oh, I got to take something away from this 40 time. That means that he's blazing speed, yada, yada, yada. It's more about the process that I put myself through to make sure that I'm getting things right.
Yeah, I think confirmation is the buzzword right there. Is confirmation of what I think I saw to what I know I saw now with the numbers.
So real quick, Dave actually brings up in the chat, remember DK Metcalf's 3-cone season? And honestly, like, this is the most relevant thing of all of the combine scores that you could ever come up with, because the fact is, like, okay, DK Metcalf puts up great fantasy points, right? But he's only going to be running one route. So, like, essentially, like, I do think that this is somewhat relevant to fantasy, and the fact that he put up such poor scores, because guess what? He's never going to be a top 3 wide receiver because he's only running one route. And if they don't have a quarterback, they're absolutely screwed. However, if he ended up having a faster 3-cone drill, and we saw him utilize his lateral quickness, which he does not possess, guess what? Like, if we saw that, he might be a top 3 wide receiver at this point, but I don't think he ever will be. So doing something like that is kind of like seeing that score lets you know that the difference between an elite level talent like Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, guys like that, versus somebody that will be in a role for the rest of their career.
I'll say this, though, on a lot of that stuff, like the way that we see with most rookie value curves, right, is like, nobody's ever expecting somebody to hit their ceiling in year one. The market doesn't act that way. The market, mostly year one for rookies is about like, are you an NFL player and potentially a good one, right? Like if you show enough to be a good starting player in year one, like then the market's usually going to be pretty optimistic about your progression moving forward. I think a lot of the stuff that you're mentioning about, like, with DK, it's like that stuff to me is almost more relevant after a guy's second year than it is at the time you get the combine score. True. Because what a lot of times people are going to overreact to is they're going to be like, this guy can't do this, he's going to bust. And it's like, not necessarily, because like most coaches, especially once you get draft capital in the mix, like they're going to use the guys in the things that they can do and according to what they can do. Right. And it's like, then this maybe paints a picture of, okay, but how much growth is there? Right. And that's when you maybe look at a DK Metcalf versus an AJ Brown after their first years and say, maybe there's more growth for one of these guys than the other guy. But if people are scared off by certain like outlier bad things coming out of first year, like, I don't think that's a big concern, because I think you're really just shooting for, is this guy good? And then you can kind of pivot from there if you want to later, because you're not usually, like, rookies aren't usually going to get asked to do absolutely everything. They're going to be put into positions to succeed. And so I think you can kind of view things from that mindset.
Jay, where are you at with what are you taking away, or what are you looking for at the combine?
Yeah, so my process is a lot about the numbers. So what I'm trying to do with these rookies is sort of paint a picture of what a profile could look like for these players. And I'm collecting data along the way. I'm looking at what draft capital could be, how old they are, what their athleticism is, and what their production was in college, and sort of adding all that together. I think one of the cool things out of the combine is you get these. One of my favorite things is to look at these relative athletic scores. I don't know tape, I don't know all that stuff, but the relative athletic scores that are put out by Ken Platt at Math Bomb, he puts these things there on a scale of 1 to 10, and kind of can give you an idea of how athletic, given the size, height, weight that each player is, and each thing that they get tested on. And then once you have that, and the player's sizes, then you can kind of figure out, like, okay, what are my ranges of possibilities from this athleticism? But I do agree with Jacob and Chase's points that most of what goes into the combine is draft capital. So these NFL teams are getting a chance to evaluate them, see how athletic they are, see how their mind works, how they operate, and to the effect or the extent that it affects draft capital, then that is important to me. So what I'm looking for from draft capital is QBs that go in the first round, and running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends that go day 2 or better, so rounds 1 through 3. And obviously I want, spend most of my time in that area trying to figure out who would have the highest likelihood of success in that area. But to the extent that a player performs well at the combine and affects that draft capital, that's what's important to me. The other thing I'd say is it's just fun. Like, I'm going to have a good time watching Jalen Hyatt, Devin Achane, Jahmyr Gibbs, Keaton Mitchell, Trey Palmer, Tyler Scott, who are all projected to run in the 4.3s.
Yep.
If one of those guys gets a 4.2, I'm going to be super excited and pumped about it. But I do agree with the sentiment.
Is going to be a appointment viewing. I think Achane will break 4.3.
Okay, so
I'm very excited for that.
That's what I was going to ask. Just as a fun little game. Who's going to run the fastest 40? Is it going to be Achane, who we know runs a 200-meter?
Well, it's bizarre. When was the last time that a running back had the fastest 40 time? Because I think it might be Chris Johnson. Yeah,
Chris Johnson. Yeah,
like that might be the
size too.
Yeah, like I mean, if that's the case, like I'm going to be all in. Like Achane will move up to like a first round pick for me, just because I think that he's going to increase his draft capital significantly if he does that.
I mean, Achane needs to go to an outside zone team, right?
Wait,
100%. He has to be outside zone.
Hang on 1 second. So if he runs sub 4.3, you're automatically moving him up?
Just put him in Miami in round 2 at that point. Like,
if you go, that's what I'm talking about. Like a dynamic playmaker that needs speed, and it's the same exact system that they run with the 49ers, who the wide zone run scheme I've been talking about for like 4 years now. You have to have burst, you have to have speed. The only thing that Achane doesn't have that you need in a wide zone run scheme is size, and that's what is wrong with like Elijah Mitchell, for example. Is you got to go up against these 300-pound dudes on the line at running as fast as you possibly can, and you're either going to get tackled or you're going to end up like slipping by.
I think Achane is legit. I think he's more than just a speed demon. Like, I understand that he has size concerns, but like, I'll say this for Achane.
It's more about the scheme, is what I was saying, Jacob.
There's a lot of guys, right? Like, there's a lot of guys who come in that are small, like a James Cook, for example, where it's like, okay, first of all, we have skepticism about the volume they can handle because they're small, and second of all, we have skepticism because of the volume that they haven't handled. But like, Devin Achane has a 41 carry game in the SEC. Like, he actually has stood up to volume. Whether an NFL coach will allow him to do that in the NFL, I have no idea. But I don't think he's like a very legitimate running back.
I don't think any NFL coach is letting
scheme.
I don't think
there's a reason why nobody for the 49ers has been able to stay healthy. There's a reason why nobody in the wide zone run scheme like landscape has been able to stay healthy outside of Derrick Henry, who just got hurt this past year. I mean, even Ickey Woods, who was the first iteration of the wide zone run scheme, got hurt after his rookie season, after he put up like 1,100 yards, as a rookie. So, I mean, Steven Jackson was a guy, but he was extremely fast, wasn't always running in the wide zone, scheme. There's never been a running back that has played more than like 4 or 5 seasons in that scheme. Is because you have to run as fast as you can, find the hole, and then cut up, and hopefully don't get decked in the side of the head by a 300-pound lineman. Like, the only reason, like I said, that it worked for Derrick Henry is just because of his actual size. Like, and it has nothing to do against the smaller guys. It has nothing to do against the chain. It's just getting decked by somebody that is literally, 33% more weight than you is tough. I love Achane going to the Dolphins. I love that. That would be my dream landing spot. I also would love to see him go to a team like the Titans, where the Titans could end up replacing him, and he'd be a mini Mouse version of Derrick Henry.
I don't want that. I still have a candle burning for Darrington Evans. I can't go through that again.
Darrington Evans is he's with the Bears.
You got Hassan Haskins.
But I just when he got drafted by the Titans, I was like, I like that.
I know, I loved him. He was the perfect. Yeah, he was the perfect.
Jay wants to say something.
You've got Hassan Haskins sitting there in Tennessee.
Oh,
stop.
Yeah, that's what he is doing, sitting there.
Yes, that's all he's gonna do is sit
there. Jay, throw your comment on this, because this is getting good real quick.
I just wanted to echo Jacob's point. I think the only thing that Achane doesn't have is his weight. That's the only thing missing from the profile. If he gets day 2, or if he gets second round draft capital, he'll be an early declare. He'll be 21 on draft day. He'll put up a great 40 time and have a good speed score that'll meet most people's thresholds, even though he's only 185 pounds.
Well,
and then when you go back
and know what he is, weight time,
right,
baby.
Exactly. And then we'll go, and then you go through the production, like yards per team pass attempt, rush yards over expected, dominatory ratings, yards per attempt, reception share. He's hitting on most everything that you could imagine from a age-adjusted production metrics. And so to me, it seems like even though the size, the weight is a bit concerning, it kind of like is different than most of the models would say for running back of what you would want to do. The rest of the stuff looks like a decent profile. And the fact of the matter is that most of the profiles for these rookies have something wrong with them. There's some issue with every single one of these guys besides Bijan. So, the weight is an issue. But one other point I'd say, like the 40 time for a chain is must watch. I think what happens with Anthony Richardson over the combine is going to be must watch too. If he's participating in everything, we get to see him do all that stuff. That's a fascinating story to me, and how that plays out, where arguably not a great passing prospect, and maybe him or Will Levis, probably one of the worst profiles that we've seen, other than his rushing upside potential that you can clearly see throughout most of his metrics.
He should convert to a running back.
No.
I think AR,
bro.
I'm with you though, Jay. Like, I mean, AR, in my opinion, AR is the most important player in the 2023 draft process from a dynasty perspective. Like, the upside is he's a top 10 drafted rushing quarterback, early declare with a cannon of an arm. And the downside is he's like a round 2 pick that you might take a stab on, in sometime in your late second round of your rookie draft, right? Like, he's either a guy who people are going to be considering with like the 104, or he's a guy that's like, barely worthy of consideration, should be going around backup running backs. So that's so massive for like, I mean, I'm a guy, like I'm naturally going to always gamble on that kind of profile. So like, if he gets a draft capital, I'm going to draft him. If he doesn't get the draft capital, I'll draft him just a lot cheaper. But
Desmond Ridder,
like, if you're sitting there with a 1.6 and a 1.7 in your rookie drafts right now, like, whether you're an AR guy or not, you are rooting for that guy, right? Because I mean, that just pushes everybody else down a rung if he gets in there. Like, if you look at who right now are we absolutely certain is going to be a round 1 rookie pick, right? It's like obviously Bijan and Gibbs, Stroud and Young, those top 3 wide receivers, JSN, Addison, Quentin Johnston, probably Levis.
Those guys.
And then it's like, we got like AR makes that, I think it gets it out to 9 of guys that like even if you don't like them in particular, but it gets you up to 9 guys where there's going to be at least half your league. Everybody's excited to click one of them. And then what we need from there is like, okay, some running backs is some good landing spots, etc. But he's massively important to this process.
I'm doing mock. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Jay. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah, you're the guest.
I'm doing mock drafts like every night now in the Debbie Royale, and AR is going at 1.06.
Mm-hmm.
That's like ADP right now for him, which is to me is very fascinating right now.
And that's I'm assuming that's Superflex, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, let's say he does go in the top 15. I don't know. I'm not going to give you a landing spot. That's all we know. We know he goes in the top 15.
Falcons.
Soda, Levis, and the other 2, obviously. Where would you draft him right now if you knew that? Like, where would you have him ranked? I think I'd put him 104, maybe 105.
Okay, so let me ask it this way. Let's say you've got him drafted in the top 15, like you just said, right?
Yeah.
Would you look at, you're saying 104, 105 somewhere. So you're looking at like Bijan 101, Stroud,
Stroud and Young. I'm not taking him over Stroud and Young. That just seems a little aggressive.
No way.
Well, what if
it comes down to him or Gibbs, right? That's
what if Young comes in at 5'9 and 3/4 or 5'9 and 7/8 or whatever?
I couldn't care less about. I think Bryce Young's size was something to worry about in Devi 2.5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think that was like a thing. Like, when he was like an 18-year-old freshman, like, I think we could have had the Devi conversation of like, is this guy going to get drafted high? To me, it's entirely irrelevant. Like, he's going to be either the first or the second overall pick in the NFL draft. Like, I don't care about his height at all.
Are they saying 5'9"? Is that the rumor?
I don't even know what they're saying. The report I've seen is 5'10.5", but he's going to measure in shortly.
5'10"?
Yeah, that's why I asked the question, because on his,
I thought he was like 6 though.
No, yeah, but see, so at Alabama they had him listed at 6 foot 194.
Yeah,
I think he's going to be closer to 5'10", 180. That's just my opinion. I'm not trying to speculate it. We'll see. I guess that'll probably come out tomorrow, I believe. When
I need to know the hand size. I need to know the hand size.
That's all you need to know is hand size anyway.
I actually think his weight matters a little more to me than the height. Like, I don't like the height thing is kind of whatever. Like, most quarterbacks that are short just never make it to the NFL. most quarterbacks that are short that do make it to the NFL don't get drafted that highly. It's not like we have like some long list of quarterbacks who are short that get drafted highly that suck. Like, okay, like Zach Wilson sucks, but I think Zach Wilson would suck if he was 6'2". Like Kyler Murray's good. Drew Brees was good. Russell Wilson was good. Like I'm not that concerned about the height.
But they're 2 inches taller.
I think that the weight matters because, like, if you watch Bryce Young play, the first thing you'll think is, why doesn't this guy have better rushing stats? And you'll be like, oh, because he would die.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's the concerning thing is because he's really, really mobile, but because he's not a dummy, he knows that he would get crunched if he ever ran like a quarterback option up the middle. So I think that's what limits him to being more of a pocket type guy on his ceiling. But I don't know. The guy can play, man.
So real quick, I didn't get to say my most exciting thing from the combine is I cannot wait to find my Donovan Peoples-Jones of this class, where they just test insanely well. And when they're at my Kadarius Toney, like I can't wait to find my insane guy, go back and watch the film as to why I didn't find him already, and go root for him for the next 5 years until he, falls out of the league.
God,
my Colin Johnson,
Colin Johnson. I was sitting there. I'm sitting there racking my brain.
Johnson,
I'm like, who is the guy? Who's the guy? Who's
I've
the guy?
only
Who's the guy?
rooted for him
Colin
because
Johnson.
I have a trading card of him. I told you guys this, but I am rooting for him now. It's not because I actually liked him coming into the process. But yeah,
well,
where's
guys,
my Colin Johnson?
Guys, thank you for tapping in. Thank you for showing your love. We are growing on the YouTube side of things.
We're growing.
We really, really do appreciate that. Please, if you are liking what we're putting out, hit that like, hit that subscribe. Absolutely. Share everything. Share everything. Yes.
That was one of my combine guys that I fell in love with after the combine.
Andy Isabella. Yeah, there you go. Tyler Scott, you might like him this year.
Joe Reed, that was my ultimate combine guy. That was my ultimate I'd never heard of him. I didn't know anything about him.
Joe Reed.
Dude, I watched him. I compared his measurables. He was literally almost identical in every statistic, every metric to AJ Brown, and I was sold that Joe Reed would be this.
Are any of those metrics like having to do with producing as a wide receiver?
He did produce in terms of like the production per like pass attempt they had. They just never passed the ball at UVA.
So just real quick, I built this whole show sheet, right? And so I sent it over to Jay on Monday just so he could have time to prep with his investor series. And we haven't talked about anything on there. And we probably won't, to be quite honest, because we're having such a foot.
Please, let's do that.
Well, you want to talk about that, or you want to talk? I got one more question on the combine.
Okay.
We're
having fun.
What is the per position? What is your favorite drill that you have to see, whether it's wide receiver, running back?
Ooh, the Deuce Staley drill. It was just introduced like 3 years ago to the combine. It is actually the most effective drill for the entire freaking combine that shows you how fast or how quick a running back is. Like, it's insane. Like, I can't remember the exact metrics because they don't actually have official time limits for it. It's more for the coaching staff. But when you say this running back killed the Deuce Staley drill, which is like this stepping drill where you have to go sideways over these bags, forward over these bags, backward, forward, and then left. Like, it shows your agility to get in and out of
it's agile, not a drill. It's a drill. It's agility, not agility.
Yeah, agility. It shows your agility. Anyways, yeah. So no, it's the Deuce Staley drill, and he uses it on all of his running backs, and in terms of like his training process, and his running backs thought that helped them out so much throughout their ability to break tackles, get loose whenever there's defenders on the ground and stuff, that they turned it into a combine drill because it was that effective. It's the only drill that they took from a coach and turned it into a drill to test players' abilities to do things. So I love the Deuce Staley drill. I love watching it.
I wonder if that's why him and Swift didn't get along. Swift said, "I'm not doing that drill." Jay, what you got for this? What's your favorite drill per position?
I think my favorite drill is the 40 time. It has to be. I like watching these big men run fast, particularly like the offensive linemen, defensive linemen, just the big old guys.
Jordan
running down the
Davis,
field, how fast they can go.
He looks like a monster. Like, dude, I want to watch that on the Oculus.
I'm excited about. I'm excited about Darnell Washington, 6'7", 270 pounds, and they say he can fly. So if he puts up a good 40 time, I'm going to be really excited about what that means.
That's the tight end, right?
Yeah, that's tight end out of Georgia. I've had him on my Devy team for I think 2 years now. So yeah, I'm excited to see.
Maybe like a better version of Mo Alley Cox.
Oh, yeah, hey, simmer down. Jacob, what you got?
Do you think I know a combine drill?
I was thinking you were going to be like 3-cone for sure.
No, I don't have a combine drill. My favorite combine drill is the weigh-in, so that I get some data to put into my spreadsheet.
I want to see how many times each player can lift 225 pounds. Yeah, I like that. All right, so
like this idea. No, not that. I just want the weigh-ins. Like all I want to know is what their height and weight is. I don't care what they do at the combine. I just want to know. All I want to know is these running backs is how many lbs they're packing. I want to know how much water they're chugging backstage before they step on the scale. That's the only thing that I have anxiety about this week is I want to know what the fuck does Jahmyr Gibbs weigh and what the fuck does Devin Achane weigh, and that's it. That's all I need to know. Oh, Jacob, and I want Zach Charbonnet to run under 4.6. Those are the 3 things on my list.
Jacob, what's your threshold for weight? What are you looking for?
It depends on whatever player.
That's a good question.
The way I try to think of players is like, it's a different type. It's a different archetype, right? So to me, it all depends on your receiving. Like Jahmyr Gibbs at 200 pounds, I'm into. If Zach Evans, I don't even know if he's going to show up and weigh in. I don't know if we're going to get.
I don't think Zach Evans is probably not going to be there because he's still dealing with a hamstring.
But
so
whatever, he'll be at a combo. Like Zach Evans, like I want him to be minimum 210 with like his kind of profile. With Jahmyr Gibbs, like I just want him to not like going to break in 2, right? Because I think it's just what percentage of your expected fantasy points is going to need to come from the rushing game is really what I'm looking at in terms of the weight. And so for a guy who potentially can produce, 8 to 10 XFP through the receiving game, I don't really need you to be more than 205, 200. For a guy who's going to be more of like that competent plotter archetype where, his receiving is just going to be a function of how many snaps he's out there on the field, like then we probably need to look at 210 plus. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I just in my model, I've always just stuck with like a 205. I know some people use 208 or just being above 200, but it's interesting. Like, so like a guy like Devin Achane or Deuce Vaughn or stuff like that, how we think about that from a weight perspective and how that applies. And clearly they're more of a receiving, and Jahmyr Gibbs, more of like the receiving production. But yeah, if Jahmyr Gibbs checks in at 205 or a few pounds above 200, that's going to be pretty exciting for me. I think a guy that I haven't always been the highest on, but if he hits the sort of the weight thresholds, maybe I get a little bit higher on him.
It was fun watching the Senior Bowl stuff because there were a lot of players. It started, I think, 2 years ago that were weighing significantly more at the Senior Bowl than they were at the Combine. And so they could say they hit this weight. And then for the Combine, they would be in shape and then not weigh in. And so you would have guys that weighed like 220 also running like a 4 or whatever, like just because they were trying to fit into that, to each one of those thresholds. So I think that's also something to keep an eye on is like how we actually place these weights, whether it was at the Combine and then what their speed was versus that. Because people just beef up because you don't need to do anything at the Senior Bowl. You can just mess around. But I want to know how many inappropriate questions will be asked at the freaking Combine this year, because it's always something bizarre that like is messed up and like you feel bad that these guys have to go through it. So I want to know how many actually get exposed this year. Over under 3.
Over under 3. Well, did y'all see the video or the picture of Zay Flowers?
Yeah, so I was going to bring that up too.
He was at the East-West Shrine Gate, if I'm not mistaken, right? So that was basically a month ago or roughly. So in 30 days being down in Florida at the Performance Center, he gained 13 pounds of solid muscle. And the side-by-side pictures, if you haven't seen them, go check those out. But it is so drastically different.
I think that matters. I think that matters to an extent in terms of like how big a player can get. If you see him max out like that, and like, he played 15 pounds lighter, obviously, like when you put on weight and whatnot, it will affect some things you did very well with. It will also, like end up helping some things you did very poorly with. But like, is he actually going to get up to like 190? Like, can he actually fit any more muscle inside of his skin and still be effective? And
he went to what? He's up to what? 183, 180,
183 or something.
183. So he's up to 183. I don't know what his height is, but I think for me anyway, it's going to be what is that burst.
I would be pretty surprised if he measures in at even 5'9". Like,
wow. Okay.
I mean, I don't know.
Had him
just looking at him on tape, like it's 5'8" to me.
I had 5'9" and 2/8 from.
You have 5'9". Okay.
5'9".
Oh, is that from the Shrine Bowl? Is that from the Shrine Bowl?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
On January 27th.
That's okay.
And he had 182 pounds for a BMI of 26.7.
Okay.
So wait, he was
pounds at the Shrine?
He was 182 at the Shrine, so he lost 13, then gained it back in muscle.
Yeah, I just had his measurements from that day on January 27th.
What do you think of what do you think of that profile, Jay? He's an interesting one where I feel like we flipped Twilight Zone on him. For anybody who doesn't play Devy or doesn't follow college guys, I could have sworn summer 2021 he was a guy who was not really on the radar, but he was an analytics data darling in Devy. And then he had a pretty disappointing third year, doesn't declare, comes back now, and he's more of a film bro-y draft riser. And
I don't say Flowers even. I watched film and I didn't really like him that much. But I mean, I don't like him just because I don't think he's gonna get any bigger than that. And you've already have so many different slot receivers in this draft, it feels like that. I don't know. I don't want it. I don't want to take the shot on another guy like this. If I'm planning on drafting a wide receiver in this draft, I'm probably trading my pick away so far.
Even if it's if it's a JSN or
I'm not on any of the top 3 wide receivers. I'm not big on.
Okay.
I'm not.
Jay,
I'd much rather go get an asset or a pick in 2024 to draft, one of these stud receivers that's coming out in 2024. But I haven't liked the wide receivers in this class since the start. So, I could just be biased at this point, and I could be just digging in my heels. But none of these guys do it for me. I mean, I've got a jump ball specialist, 2 slot receivers. One of them doesn't do anything special. The other one, is tiny. I don't love it. Sorry. I'll find a guy. I know I will find a guy that I'm going to be in love with, and he's likely going to be a late 2nd round pick in Dynasty rookie drafts. But as of right now, I don't love a guy.
Yeah, I think I like this wide receiver class, I think, more than most. It's not an incredible class, but I think we compare it to by outrageously good wide receiver classes.
True.
We had this discussion last year where people were people didn't think that last year's wide receiver class was good. I'm not even reflecting on it. Well, that's insane. I mean, we have 3 of the best performing rookie, the top 3 wide receivers from this year's rookie class, are the best that I have in my database from a rookie season, collectively. I think that it's an outstanding rookie class, but people were knocking that rookie class. It obviously ended up being really good. I think the reason why people were knocking that was because the 2021 and 2020 rookie classes were so good at wide receiver.
Yeah.
This is it's not as good as those on paper. Maybe it ends up being as good as those. We'll see. But I think JSN is a really strong bet. I think Addison is as conventionally strong of a bet as you'll find. He's just not the most exciting player in the universe. I think Josh Downs is really undervalued right now in the process. We'll see what his draft capital is, but his profile looks particularly strong. I think Quentin Johnson is fascinating.
That's your Drake London of this year.
No, he's not my Drake London of this year. I don't think that he actually has much in common with Drake London at all. I think that Drake London was I can see some similarities from purely an analytical standpoint, but from a play style standpoint, I don't think they have anything in common. I think Quentin Johnson has a lot more in common with Treylon Burks than with Drake London. Drake London was slow, but Drake London was a technician, man. That guy can run routes. That guy can perform at all levels of the field. He has Quentin Johnson has all the raw tools in the world. The problem is Quentin Johnson does all the things that you think a big wide receiver can't do, and he does none of the things that you want a big wide receiver to do. You don't think the jump balls, the no, he sucks on jump balls. He's one of the worst jump ball wide receivers I've ever watched.
Okay, I need to go back.
He catches them this. His hand positioning is brutal. He catches them right with his hands. His conversion on 50-50 balls is low, but he's an incredible yak player. So I don't know.
Jay, I need your input on this.
Yeah, I was just fixing to say I'm going to go in. I want Jay on this.
That I watched, I thought I saw him being great on contested catches.
Oh, no, I don't think he was good at it. But first, Flowers, your comment on Flowers. So I think what's interesting about this class is the sort of the alpha versus beta tech. We have a lot of lighter wide receivers in this class between Jordan Addison, Zay Flowers, Marvin Mims, and Jalen Hyatt, who I consider all like kind of up there in terms of ranking these wide receivers relative to Quentin Johnston, Jackson Smith and Jigba, and Kayshon Boutte. The lighter ones, those guys are all early declares except for Zay Flowers. So Zay Flowers was a guy that went 4 years in college. But that would be the one differentiator there. And then in terms of Quentin Johnston, I have his contested catch rate down at in year 3 was a 34.8%. So that's what you really want to see is you want to see
add
like
more
the
context
60s.
to that, by the way. On passes 20 plus air yards down the field, his contested catch rate was 23%.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm wondering what the separation rate and all that stuff was, but that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's I have issues with contested catch rate as a stat, but like I just the statistical profile on him from a contested catch standpoint is one of the worst I've ever seen. And from watching him on film, he's one of the worst contested catch.
Yeah. I mean, well, okay. I was watching the film. I only watched 2 games of him, so I need to watch the full season.
I mean, I think his ceiling as a contested catch player is obviously way higher than a Jordan Addison, right? But I just don't think that he's technically sound at it right now. Like he doesn't track the ball well. The ball's high. He's jumping early. He's catching it here. Like if with good coaching, he has a chance to be the best contested catch player in the class because he's huge and he's athletic and he's fast. Like, I think he could be that guy. I don't think currently he has the technical skills I don't think he is that guy, but I don't want to be like, basically what I'm saying is that I hate watching Quentin Johnston play football, but that I don't want to say that he sucks because I could easily see 2 years later, having been coached well, him being a lot better at the things that he's currently deficient at, and me look like an idiot if I'm just outright fading him. So I'm not going to outright fade him.
He reminds me of a poor man's Colin Johnson. I will say that I'm
concerned.
Here we go with Colin Johnson and put again.
He's the poor man's Colin Johnson.
Jeez.
Dude, if Shane was on the show, he would have already left.
He would have been gone.
Tapped out. I've already done Colin Johnson like 3 times.
Yeah, you've said it 3 times. I haven't even gotten
the Kenny Gainwell take that I had. Like,
oh no. Jay, go on, keep going. I'm gonna mute you. I'm gonna mute Chase. I'm gonna mute you on your own show.
This is like my favorite episode ever. Like just because of the guys we get to talk about. Oh my god, it's only gonna get worse the next like 2 months.
So
go ahead.
Kevin
Coleman and I at Du Bois 22, we do a patron only podcast on the Devy Rail, and we do a lot of these profiles. And one of them we did was Quentin Johnston, and the comp that we came up with was a healthy Mike Williams. So that's kind of like what his play style could be. His size kind of fits along that, and if he lives up to his potential of actually being able to make those catches, I think that's what he could potentially be. And then, Jacob brought this up, but the point that I'd emphasize here is the yak ability is pretty outstanding. If you sort with a minimum of 80 targets, he was wide receiver 2 in 2022 with an 8.9 yak per reception. And it's not, when you think about yak, a lot of times you think about just running through people. This guy runs so fast around people, and he can gain those extra yards after the catch.
But combine that with twitch to him too. Like you talked about Metcalf as like a big wide receiver who doesn't have that lateral quickness. Like that's to me the best part of Quentin Johnston's game is you don't see a lot of wide receivers that big and that long who have that lateral agility. I think that's a really interesting trait.
Didn't Drake London have that? He played the slot.
I was just saying, I watched a video. I watched a clip of Quentin Johnston caught a wide receiver screen, had 4 dudes around him, and he was able, with his side to side, movement, was able to get. He only got like 4 yards, but it was 3 yards behind the line of scrimmage. So he was with that. The movement that he has is nice. That's something that you don't see with those bigger wide receivers.
And I've always said, by the way, Chase, I do think Drake London's an underrated yards after the catch player, and the stats bear that out. The issue is if Drake London shakes somebody, he gets tackled 5 yards later, whereas if Johnson shakes somebody, he's gone. Right?
Yeah, he's a gazelle. Yeah. He's a gazelle.
Jay, go ahead and finish off, Jay.
If you combine the 9 yak per reception plus the 13 ADOT, and you look at that from that perspective, it's a pretty intriguing profile. People knock him for production, but if you games adjust most of his production, there's some times he spent injured. There's some times, like he wasn't involved in every week. But if you games adjust everything out, his actually production looked pretty good when you're looking at like yards per team pass attempt, dominator, weighted dominator, EPA per play. A lot of that stuff, like, looks okay. So, he does check a lot of boxes. I think the knock from a film grader's perspective is the sort of not catching the ball in the best possible ways, or high pointing the ball, or catching the ball and stuff like that. So
that and his release package leaves a lot to be desired, in my opinion. He has like a weird hop step that he likes to do every time he's on the line. It's like he's like galloping into the route.
Strange.
I don't know.
I was like, what is he doing right now? I know
He's getting ready for the Derby.
Hey, real quick. So I have a question specifically for Jay and Jacob. We created this show sheet. We made a title for the show called Roster Construction. And this is Jacob's last show as part of a regular co-host on Fantasy Intervention, which is awesome for him as he's moving on. So I want to
ask forever, guys. I'll be back periodically.
Because I was going to say, because he did message me. He did message me personally and said, I will love to be an honored guest anytime I'm available.
So every other week. Anyways, so I want to know, we're at 57 minutes, and we used to do these shows in the off season, these Dynasty shows that will last like an hour and a half to 2 hours from time to time. We definitely want to dive into Jay's, roster construction. That's the whole reason why we brought him on. Do you guys have time to dive into that?
Absolutely. That's awesome.
No rush.
Jay, like, you don't have to. You can leave. Like,
listen, Shane,
like, I'm tapping out.
Shane tells us all the time I'm out. So
let's do it. Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. All right, so let's get into the topic of the night then. And now we're into the show. We're finally getting into the topic of the night.
Massive intro section. Well, Jay, so disclaimer, I'm sitting there and I'm talking to Jay, and it hit me on like Monday or Sunday. I was like, Jay, combine's coming up. There's a lot of conversation in the combine. We should probably talk about the combine. He goes, oh, I have a question there about the combine. In my mind, I'm sitting there, I'm like, yeah, okay. Our intro is going to be 30 minutes. It turned out to be an hour, and Shane wasn't even here, which is the craziest part.
And truth be told, I messaged Jay this morning. I was like, so we may go a little longer than I thought on the combine. He goes, cool. He's like, no problem. All right, so let's get into the roster construction. So, Jay, I'm going to ask you this first. What is your favorite roster settings? Whether, roster size, super flex, tight end premium, you're going into a startup. What do you like? This is what I want to have as my roster, size or super flex or whatnot.
Yeah. So I'll talk about the types of leagues I like first. I particularly like campus to Canton leagues. Those are probably my favorite. I like Devy leagues. Interesting enough, I've been really gotten into a rabbit hole on 32 team single copy leagues.
Yes.
Yes, I'm in like 4 or 5.
Freaking degenerates! You're degenerates.
I'm so into it right now. Like with IDP. Do you play IDP?
With IDP, yeah.
You have to play IDP.
32 team leagues with IDP.
Yeah. So here's the deal.
I think I would rather get into heroin.
IDP
Jacob, they're playing.
Scoring has to be higher because if not, then the teams without a quarterback are screwed.
So
IDP has to be outrageous
being into this because it allows him to derive value from irrelevant players.
Colin Johnson.
I see CJ Ham as one of my starting running backs.
If you're playing in a 32 team league, it's I can start this third tight end who runs 7 routes a game. Chase is
Isaiah Likely, he's on almost all my rosters in the 32 team leagues. I love it so much.
Go ahead, Jay. Tell him.
I have Joe Reed still on one of my teams. Just in case.
Yeah, so those are my favorites right now. I think most of my leagues end up being sort of in that 25 to 35 roster spaces with about 4 to 10 taxi squad players. It's usually playing Superflex now. That's sort of becoming the de facto here. And largely, I find that tight end premium is starting to be more and more the norm as well, whether that's 1.5 or 1.75 or 2. So that's bringing a new interesting strategies to it. But usually the way that the leagues are set up is, start 11 or 12. That's kind of how I most of my leagues are going now, with 1 QB, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, 1 super flex, and 3 flex spots. So that's generally how most of my leagues are shaping up, even though I do like those Campus Canton and W leagues and all those 32 single copy teams.
Chase, what's your favorite settings?
Best ball. Best ball's like taking over for me. I love 32 team leagues. That's my new fun one that I've been in over the past year. The ones especially that are heavy on the defensive scoring. And of course, Dynasty, is pretty much what I built this, fantasy intervention on was Dynasty leagues and whatnot. So my least favorite are just normal season-long leagues. Sorry for everybody that's disappointed to hear that, but it's probably my least favorite. My favorite are best ball, DFS, and then Dynasty or the 32 team leagues.
So I'm glad you brought up best ball, because we need to do, and hopefully we may even be able to do it live. We need to do a best ball on the show. And I think maybe we might be able to get Jacob to actually get involved in it.
I did want to talk to Jacob about that. I'll talk that later. We actually had somebody that commented that wanted some best ball content. So I told him I would talk to you and get it scheduled.
I'll come on for best ball content when I can. Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, also, I do want to give a shout out to this guy, you can find him. I think it's at Coach Stephen P over there on Twitter. He puts together all these unique leagues with unique scoring, and it's really crazy off the wall stuff. And I don't know how many leagues he's in, but it has to be at least 100 at this point. He doesn't advertise it. He doesn't go out and talk about it very often. He actually did the Start or Sit show with us on Sundays here. He created this new league that I joined, and it's you draft teams, 2 teams at each position, and you actually get to start 1 player from that position at quarterback. I think it's also super flex, and then 3 wide receivers total. So 3 wide receivers from 2 teams, 2 running backs from 2 teams, 1 tight end from 2 teams, and it's Dynasty setup. So like you get the players halfway through. I'm trying to talk the whole league because it's only 12 teams. I'm trying to talk the whole league and let us do in a midseason draft. So like it depends on your scoring setup and everything like that. But like, yeah, Coach Stephen P puts together these wild leagues, man, like vampire leagues, like, zombie leagues, all these other types of crazy leagues. So you guys should go check him out and follow him over there on Twitter.
Yeah, and I just looked him up. It is Coach Stephen P. If I'm not mistaken, I'm hoping I'm getting it right. It's Coach Stephen P on Twitter.
Yeah, cool guy. Really cool guy.
All right. So, Jacob, did you finish off what your favorite settings were?
No, I mean, I probably the 2 things I talk about most are Dynasty and tournaments. Like, I think that probably the stuff that I find most interesting about fantasy football in general is like the idea that there's multiple goals sort of worth chasing, and that you're trying to like swerve whatever the market is doing. And I think like what's always like the fundamental conflict of Dynasty, right, is like, do you want a higher chance to win now, or do you want more value to help you win later? And like, that's to me what makes Dynasty fun. To me, I love like a lot of the best ball tournament stuff is really appealing to me, because you look at, okay, what's going to help me advance versus what's going to increase my chances of winning, with the teams that I do advance. Like basically anytime that there's these sort of interesting strategic quandaries, that's what really gets my gears going. So those are probably the 2 things that I focus on most in my writing and my research and in like what I play the most often.
So the reason I went around the way I did, because I wanted to start this next question with you, Jacob. And if Shane was here, I'd probably started with him. But since he's not, Jacob, you are going to be the guinea pig. How much does the roster construction change when you go from a 9-man starting roster to a 12-man starting roster? Like quarterback, I get it, but what is the biggest change from a start 9 to a start 12?
Yeah, I think like whenever I commish leagues, I usually try to throw in funky settings, either like excessively deep leagues, or I'll change like the quarterback scoring a little bit, or the running back. I'll just change a little, like some stuff, mostly because I just don't think that people do a very good job of actually recalibrating how they draft and how they value players to the settings. And it's like, in theory, like it doesn't really make any sense, because why do we feel the certain ways about how we feel about how we construct our teams, right? Whether you're like a 0 RB person, or you are always take the quarterback early person, whatever your stances are, all that's just based on, your certain take about how certain positions provide value in a given context. And anytime the context changes, that changes a ton, right? And so I think it's always to sort of a person who's more strategic and more intentional about how they're drafting's advantage to have settings that diverge from the norm. Your specific question about 9 versus 12 is that it changes quite a bit. First of all, I think that any time that you have any sort of condensing effect on the scoring settings, assuming it's a super flex league, especially, any condensing effect on the scoring settings has a major hidden benefit to quarterbacks, right? So when, on underdog, for instance, best ball, when it goes to half PPR, quarterbacks have more relative value to other positions. When you're talking about a 9 team, or a start 9 versus start 12, quarterbacks have more value compared to the other positions, because that remains largely stable. And all that changes is what's the replacement level among the other players, right? If you're in a start 9, it's just between running back and wide receiver then versus start 9 versus start 12. There's an interesting dynamic between those two positions, which is, people talk about scarcity, and you'll have arguments from 0 RB people versus arguments from running back early people. They'll talk about scarcity in very different ways. Running back scarcity hits earlier, in the sense that after a fairly small list of running backs, you're not going to have that elite level of production. In wide receiver, it's much flatter for the top. Of course, the difference is once you get past a certain threshold of wide receiver, maybe it's 40 to 50 of them, now you're just drawing stone dead, right? Because wide receiver production is so tied to, do you actually have the ability to run routes and earn targets on those routes? Versus a running back, you have like a base level of production that's just from being in there and playing the snaps. And that can be, entirely unspecially talented running backs, or it can just be a guy filling in for backup. And I think what people forget about too, in a dynasty context, is that, you can trade for running backs more easily to fill that production. Where if you're ever just totally stuck, if anybody start running back, you can trade somebody a 3rd round pick for whatever backup, is going to be a spot start for that week, and you can fill that spot. Connor talks about that a lot. Mm-hmm. So anyway, that's a long-winded answer, but the point is, start 12, what actually hits is the wide receiver scarcity, because you actually need to be able to roster 5 to 6 viable wide receivers that you're starting almost every week. And there just aren't an endless supply of viable wide receivers. Start 9, you're never running dry on those viable wide receivers. And so when you push that threshold up for the replacement level, all of a sudden things really shift more in favor of running back versus wide receiver. And so that's a pretty substantial difference.
Chase.
Honestly, like Jacob said everything that I would ever say, outside of at start, start 12 versus start 9, I would end up opting to go with a tight end way earlier than I typically would for a start 12, because when you have a start 12, you have a positional advantage of 4 to 5 tight ends, and that's all you have to worry about each week is 4 to 5 teams. Typically, you can stream tight ends and give yourself a good enough chance outside of maybe Travis Kelce to compete on a week-to-week basis for that tight end position. So tight end becomes a lot less valuable to me in start 12 than it is start 9 outside of the top tight end. Like if you have them all in a similar tier, that's a different animal. But if you have like Travis Kelce at like tier 1 and then nobody in tier 2, and then you have, somebody else in tier 3, that's where I end up tending to fade the tight end position for that start 12.
All right. So Jay, if you want to answer that question, that's fine. But this is the one I wanted to send to you, is whether it's start 9, whether it's start 12. It's whichever way you want to look at it. But how do you determine the value of a roster spot on your team?
Yeah, so the first question, start 9 versus 12, how does that change roster construction? I would say like everything becomes a bit more concentrated. And in the start 9 situation, you're looking for the top end elite guys that differentiated. So I'd be interested in making trades like 2 or 3, 4 for 1 type of deals along the way. Also, when you're in a start 9 league, the roster sizes get pushed down a little bit, so then it becomes more interesting on the waiver wire. So that's when you get into like sort of those like waiver wire conversations and strategies and how to figure that affect that from a roster perspective. And then from a value perspective, okay, so what I do for the Intelligent Investor series is I look at player value. So what I'm trying to do, and largely it's sort of like a trading mechanism, but so some of the principles actually come from what Jakob has talked about in terms of clustering players of similar age, potential, and fantasy points per game. And what I do is I go through these players. I pull down their KTCs. And the way that I value players is KTC divided by fantasy points per game. And KTC is Keep Trade Cut. It's from keeptradecut.com. It's a crowdsourcing site.
Such BS. And over the past few years, it's gotten so much more intelligent, which actually goes to show how much more intelligent the Dynasty community has. Like I just wanted to feature that. Like back in the day, like I would see like player X over player Y by like significant margins. And I'd be like, dude, what is everybody smoking? Like you're rating a 31-year-old wide receiver 20 spots over a 25-year-old wide receiver with similar metrics just because of name value.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The Dynasty community has gotten so intelligent in terms of valuing players over the past few years that it goes a lot to show for the companies that are investing into Dynasty, like how far the reach has gotten. But anyway, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to bring that aspect up of, hey, keep in mind, this isn't the same Dynasty league you played in 5 years ago.
Yeah. So I take those values, and for me, that's keep, trade, cut. So they ask you whether that you'd keep, trade, or cut a player, and then they come up with an algorithm that assigns a value to each one of those players. And I use that essentially as my price, as my dollars. And then the bottom part of the fraction is earnings. So each player goes out on the field and they earn fantasy points per game, just like a company would report earnings from their financial statements. So this ratio that I've created is the price divided by earnings. So price is my KTC and earnings is my fantasy points per game. And I divide the two and create this fraction that I can then use to compare players. So what I do, and I kind of picked this up from Jakob and Drew in the Bulletproof Patreon, was this clustering of players into similar potential, age, and fantasy points per game. And so I cluster players that should be essentially valued similarly on a KTC basis because they score similar points, because they're the same age. And I look and see what the discrepancies are. Are there inefficiencies in the market between how many points these guys score versus how they should be valued on KTC? And then my process is, so the lower the PE, the better the value. But then what I do is I come up with price targets for each of these players. So I'm able to say that I think Kyle Pitts his KTC is this price, and I actually think it should be 2,000 KTC higher or 1,500 KTC higher, which represents 20% upside from his current levels. And then I'm able to say that I think there's a quantifiable amount of KTC that I think that Kyle Pitts is undervalued, which is, I think, important to my process. So then I implement it by, it's sort of these like trading strategies. So what I want to do, and Jakob talks about this, is trade at cost. So I go to KTC, I want to make sure everything lines up. But then I have this hidden value within each trade where Kyle Pitts is actually undervalued, and I think his KTC is getting to this point. So the trade balances on KTC, but over time, if I'm right, I'm going to actually pick up this additional KTC. So that's sort of my process. The other thing I've been doing lately is modeling these guys on a KTC basis over time to see what their KTC, like a stock chart, would look like over time. And I put a bunch of lines on there, like 150-day moving average and some averages and a bunch of like bracketing lines and stuff like that to see what his past historical prices can tell us about the future. And so those are all different methods in terms of how I value and look at valuing players and how that translate into how you can figure out a roster. But I guess the main point there that I'd add onto it was like this emphasis of compounding. It's something I talk about. I'm not sure anybody's really put a name to it, but really what you want to do is you want to trade down the price curve while keeping the production similar, and then collect the plus more. And just like compounding for financial terms, like you have an interest-bearing account, you put money in it, you earn interest. Then a month later, you earn interest on that principal plus more interest. So you're making money on money, or wealth on wealth. In fantasy football, that's what I try and do by trading down a price curve, keeping the production the same, but collecting those draft picks. And once you have those draft picks, then you can do a tremendous amount of stuff with that extra.
Yeah, I will help you come up with a name. I came up with a dose score, so I'm pretty sure I can come up with. No, I'm just kidding.
That right there was absolute phenomenal.
You're essentially right. You're putting your arbitrage profit in the bank, right? And then you're investing that. You got the first half of that is just arbitrage, but the second half for the compound, you got to come up with a name for that. That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah,
love that.
absolutely.
Soliloquy.
We'll talk.
So
we'll come up with something. I'll just take 1%.
Yeah,
whatever. No, I'm just kidding.
It's 1%. That's awesome. That is awesome.
1% to help you come up with a name. No, I'm just kidding. No, that's awesome. That's
gonna be
cool.
That's gonna be trending in like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
After we come up with a name for that.
So far, this process that I've gone through to try and figure out the values, and it's a lot like the stock market. So an analyst will give a buy recommendation and stuff like that, and then you could sell it. And obviously, not every one of these recommendations can be put in act because you don't have every single one of these players on your squad, so you can't do these types of things with every single one. But I keep a track record of every recommendation, when I gave the recommendation, what I thought the target price should be, and where it ended up. And clearly, I'm going to miss on some. I've collected all that data, but I have quite a few trades. And so far, over the past year, with all these recommendations, I've been able to accumulate 16,500 KTC. Which, when you put that in terms of like first round picks, that's like 3 early first round picks if you were able to implement all of that stuff. Wow. And one of the things I was trying to do through this process was, a lot of times you'll see analysts out there that they'll say buy this player. But you don't really know what you're supposed to pay or what any of that stuff is. And I wanted to be very like specific with how I gave buy and sell recommendations, and then have a specific track record that goes along with it. So you can actually tell, as an analyst, I didn't just say buy 20 players and then come back a year later and say, hey, look, I said buy, but then I forgot about the other 19 that were not necessarily hits. So keeping track of everything.
Oh man, I love that. I absolutely love that. It's this whole concept brings me back to Jacob's first article, essentially, that drove me insane. He sent me like a freaking 16-page documentary of what he thought trade should be, and I told him to break it up into like separate segments.
Broke it up into several parts.
Yeah, we ended up turning in I think it was a total of 66 articles. That I had to edit.
Yeah.
66.
No, it was like
it was not 66, but it ended up being a 4-part series.
Okay,
that each 4 parts were like 5 parts, and it was I remember thinking I could do it all in one. It was like, yeah, basically.
I tried reading it, and my brain went dead in like the first page and a half, and I was like, dude, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about, but it kind of makes sense. However, I'm looking at it from an editing perspective. And I'm like trying to skim through it, and my mind literally was about to explode. I remember having a conversation with a couple of the co-owners at the time of Fantasy Intervention when we were creating, and I was like, hey, does anybody else want to edit this? Because I just worked the entire day. I have about 2 hours left in me, but this takes up about this is equivalent of me working for 10 minutes, and I'll be working 2 hours, and I won't get anything done on it. And they both looked at it, and they both said, Nope, we're not editing this. We don't know what the fuck he's talking about. So it's great to see the mind just expand and take Dynasty to a whole different level. But Jay, sorry to take over. I just want to give you a shout out, Jay, because that's awesome.
No, that the stuff that I have seen with Jay, and this is why I wanted to get him on, because this guy knows so much that it's just not out there yet, and like Jacob, whatever it was 3 years ago when he came to you, Chase, and was giving you that. It's just it wasn't there yet. We as a community are not prepared for this. It's more information than we're prepared to understand, right? So Jay giving the information and then breaking it down to
that's awesome.
This is the philosophy of it. This is why I wanted to get him on. So, Jacob, do you have anything to add? Are you smart enough to understand anything he said?
No, that was awesome, man. That was a blast. I'm really glad we got to do this, and yeah, I mean, I'm sure your star is pointing directly upward. Now I do have to go. We've given an extra 25 minutes, but
well, we were fixing. I was fixing to cut it anyway.
I'm glad we did that, though. I'm really glad we did that.
It
would have been a massive disservice if we didn't include
100%.
Jay talking about that, and I'll shout that whole thing out personally later for people that didn't stay for all 80 minutes because that was awesome.
Yes. So
Jacob, before you go, can I get like you always say is best player in the world? Can I get the Bulletproof Patreon? You always say, or a Bulletproof podcast? You always say that he's the best player in the world type of thing.
What's this?
Can I hear that?
Can I hear the best player in the world?
Yeah.
Who do you?
No, you always say you and Drew always say best player in the world. Currently, the best player in the world at this task.
Oh,
well, let's relate that to the combine.
Sorry. Well,
who's going to be who's the best player in the world?
Okay. Sorry, I think I was a bit confused.
Yeah. I'm just a regular listener of you and Drew going back and forth.
Maybe he doesn't realize that he says it.
I don't think I realize what I say.
Wow.
In what context do I say this?
Maybe it's not you. Maybe it's Drew that I hear it from. Maybe I got it mixed up. But
I buy that I say it. I think I usually I know I refer to AJ Brown as the best wide receiver in the world constantly, but I don't know if I don't know if I.
He is the best wide receiver in the world. He's my Dynasty wide receiver 3, and I don't give a fuck who says that that's wrong. AJ Brown.
Oh yeah, I mean he's incredible. Yeah, I wish that I had something offhand. I don't know. I don't know the context. I'm sorry. I wish I could tee this up for you.
Yeah.
But...
My bad. Yeah, I just
it's
I listen to you all.
Do I put
you guys
ketchup
all
on
the
mac
time,
and cheese?
So love it. Stop.
No, I have never even had mac and cheese, Jamie.
What? This is why, and this is exactly why Shane is. Thank God we know Canadian tonight. What do you mean you've never had mac and cheese?
Okay, so both that entire concept of ketchup on mac and cheese disgusts me. I've never had mac and cheese in my life. I was lactose tolerant until I was like 10. I eat several dairy products now, but several of them I do not. The smell
What's your address?
Of
We need
everybody
that's listening to send you a package.
Easy Mac.
I do not like.
Easy
I won't,
Mac.
No, I won't. I mean, I won't.
You're going way present. You're getting Easy Mac.
I will not eat it. And then Jamie's bringing up the next thing. Ketchup is my least favorite food product on the planet. Like if ketchup is on anything,
no, it's maple syrup. They put maple syrup on everything.
So the idea of ketchup on mac and cheese is like my two greatest food nightmares come together. I wouldn't. If someone had that in the same room as I was, I would leave the room.
Well, Jacob, I know you got to get out of here. Thank you for joining us yet again. This is your last night with us.
Hold on. Time out. Are we? Do we have anything left on the show sheet?
Oh, there's plenty left on the show sheet, but Jacob said he's got to go.
Yeah, Jay. I mean, it's been an hour and a half. Jay, do you want to save some of the stuff for the next time you're on? Or are you ready to go?
Yeah, that's all. You.
No, he's coming back. No. There's not an invite anymore. It's not an invite.
Okay,
It'll just be like, hey, I need you tonight. By the way, you're coming in 2 weeks.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah,
this is awesome.
You're taking the analytical side.
Right.
Yeah, you're coming back, and to be quite honest, you might be coming back on a regular.
Who knows? We'll see.
I mean, maybe.
Awesome.
We can't promise anything. We gotta.
I didn't say I was promising anything. I said might. It's like your parents. One says maybe, the other one says no. You're still in the middle.
The dad right now.
Jacob, tell everybody where they can find you at, sir.
You can find me on Twitter at Jakob Sanderson. And moving forward, starting literally today, You can find my written work exclusively at jacobsanderson.substack.com, which is the Thinking About Thinking Substack. I have my intro post. It's free for anybody, and I'll have my first post for paid subscribers up certainly within the week. So I'm excited about that for sure, and excited for anybody who supports me with that along the way, and it'll be a really fun journey. I'm looking forward to it. And I mean, people that are familiar with my writing, my podcasting, probably have a good idea of what kind of stuff I'm going to talk about. But yeah, it'll be a blast. Mostly Dynasty focused, but I'll talk some tournament best ball stuff too. I'll talk about honestly kind of whatever pops into my head, which is kind of the goal of being your own boss and writing a letter like that. So I'm excited for it. And certainly, I'm not like going for people that are curious about why I won't be on the show as often anymore. It's just that, for most of my time in the fantasy industry, which has been 2 years, 2.5 years, something like that, total. I've been in law school, which means that I don't have necessarily a ton of free time, but I do have a lot of agency over how I organize my time. And so I can do a bunch of scheduled shows, and then I can write papers and study whatever at random times of the day. And starting May, that will not be my life. I will be working 9 to 5, maybe sometimes 9 to 9. And so, the fantasy stuff is going to be stuff that's going to be doing at weird times of the day and night. So
amongst other weird things,
many live shows and articles with timelines and stuff. But certainly when I do have time, I'll want to spend it here. So I'm not like leaving for eternity or anything like that.
Please go support Jacob. He needs more wall art outside of 2 pictures behind his head. And then whenever he goes to his parents' house, a snowy cabin picture.
Yeah, but that snowy cabin though, Jacob's at home when you see that snowy cabin behind his head, he's home. Well, Jacob,
icon. That's an icon of the show.
Yes.
It's a wooden background with the one random snowy cabin.
From me to you, thank you for letting me be part of a group of guys that you and Shane and Chase all together welcomed me right in. I've enjoyed every second with you. You've never, you've led me along the way. You've never given me bad advice. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Aww.
And I will be following you. Oh, hey, shut up, Chase.
I didn't say that. He said that.
Oh, did you say that? You said, oh. See, I might have to go to Canada.
Yeah, I gave you that.
No, dude, listen, you are always welcome. 100%. Always welcome. Even if you just on a Wednesday night, you pop in, you're like, hey, I want to come on. Absolutely. Absolutely. You're welcome.
All right.
Jay, where can they find you? What's going on?
I
Oh wait, wait, never mind. We're just kicking him out, right?
We're gonna end the show now, and we'll dive into something else later.
All right, so Jay, let's start over. Where can they find you?
My Dynasty content is going to be on the Football Guys. That's something that's new. And then so that Intelligent Investor series there is going on the Dynasty or on the Football Guys. And then I do some like Devi content. I have these Devi or these YouTube videos that it correspond with the Intelligent Investor, those price charts that I was talking about. That is on the Devi Rail YouTube channel. It's a chart a week. Every week I put out on Thursday a new chart of a different player from a KTC perspective. It's just interesting to look at. And then I do a podcast every Wednesday with Kevin Coleman at Du Bois 22 on the Devi Rail Patreon. He's an awesome guy.
Yes,
and each week we look at sort of either rookie prospects for the new rookie players, or we go dive into the Devi players and sort of look at sort of their analytical profile versus what Kevin can pick up in terms of film and kind of try to paint the picture for the prospects. So yeah, Football Guys, Devi Royale, and go check it out.
Love it, man. Absolutely love it. And a big shout out to Jacob, of course. I had this conversation with him a couple months ago. When he was planning on leaving, I said, hey, just come on for every other show, and we'll figure out what we're going to do from there. He's brought a lot to the show. He brought a lot during some hard times this show was going through, and was a solid rock throughout those times, which I will be forever grateful for. The dude came along and like I said, the first article absolutely blew my mind in terms of, what he was able to bring to the table. And it was kind of funny because people would come up to me and be like, hey, what's up with this Jacob kid? He has like 500 followers. He seems really smart, but he's also somewhat controversial. And it wasn't the fact he was controversial. He was actually just giving statistics, and people thought he was trying to fight with them. And he's like, no, you just don't understand what I was saying. I was actually getting your back. You just didn't actually read through or didn't understand what I was saying. And it was funny because he was introduced to me by Thomas Tipple as the smartest man in Canada. Which was
second smartest now. Second smartest now.
But it was cool to watch this kid grow and to get to where he's at in the fantasy community. And now he's commanding his own newsletter, which he will be producing at least one a day, according to him. If you go to
I thought it was one an hour.
Oh no, 1 an hour. He'll be doing one newsletter an hour, pending all the analytical research he'll be doing. So
that's why I gotta get up the show.
Yeah, because if you do shows an hour and a half like this,
I gotta get 3 done in the next 90 minutes to catch up.
But it's fun. It's funny because I would sit there and I would say like I'm proud of him, but I expected it. Like I'm not proud of him because I expect him to be where he is right now. Like I expect him to pass everybody else up, and honestly, he could have. If he decided to make this his career, he would already be probably the top followed guy like of 2022, and he would be the top target for people for companies that are trying to bring on the most brilliant minds in the fantasy industry. The reality is he wants to do something better. He wants to help people. He wants to get in a situation where he's dealing with different situations other than just fantasy football, and I think that's fucking awesome. And I'm stoked to see where he's at right now. I'm stoked that he's somebody I can call a friend, and I'm stoked that he stuck with me throughout the rough times. So I appreciate you, Jacob.
Yeah, that was way too sweet. I wasn't prepared for that. That's why I should have done this when Shane was on. He would have said something much meaner and shorter to intersplice the two loving comments. But no, I mean, you guys know I love you guys. I've said this on air before, but I mean, Chase gave me my first shot in the industry, which is something I'll forever be grateful for. And I'll never lose sight of that in terms of always looking for opportunities to work with you. And then obviously he introduced me then to Jay, comes on, and it's been an absolute blast. And I'll make sure to come back. The only reason I'm okay with this because I'll 100% be back on sometime when Shane's also on, so I can.
What's weird is like the next time you have to come on, Shane will not be on for best.
No, I'll make sure that Shane is on.
No. But the next time Shane could not be on for best ball.
Well, and that's going to be Jacob's stipulation.
I will only come on to do best ball with Shane. Yeah.
Oh my Lord!
That's an IDP.
Guys, it has been an absolute pleasure. Of course, with Jacob. Now we got Jay Stein in the building. Thank you, sir, for coming on, giving us some insight. Jacob, we love you. You'll always be a part of our heart. Shane, sorry you missed out. Chase, thank you again, as always. And to the chat and everybody listening afterwards, thank you for letting us intervene with your fantasy life. We out.